Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Agents of Change. Today, we're doing a webinar on launching a B2B catalog to increase customer engagement. We're doing this series because every time we go out and speak to a B2B manufacturer or a B2B reseller or a B2B distributor, they're asking us, hey, what's that first step I can take into digital? If I wanted to start digitally transforming the way that we run our marketing and sales, what is that logical first step that we should take? And for most companies, that logical first step is launching a B2B catalog. So we wanted to go ahead and answer that for you. So how do you go about doing that? How do you do it quickly? How do you do it in a way that's affordable, that can drive a return? So I pulled together a panel of experts, our good friends Lindsey from Salsify and Chris Boyke from Bloomreach, to help answer this question. How do you launch a B2B catalog? Lauren and Chris, do you mind go ahead and introducing yourselves?
Sure. Thanks, Rohit. Hi, I'm Lauren Lindsey. I work for Salsify. I head up our retail and technology partnerships, and I'm really excited to be speaking with you guys today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Boyke. I'm a senior solutions consultant with Bloomreach, and I'm going to be talking to you today about how to provide the best digital experience for your B2B catalog.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Chris. And thanks again for joining us here today. I think everyone's going to find a tremendous amount of value in your experience and what you're going to be sharing here with us today. So what we want to start with is this concept that anything is possible. So if you're listening out there and you belong to a B2B organization, chances are this is not the first time that you're thinking about digital transformation. That's why you're listening to this. And having some sort of online presence is something that's most likely been an initiative within your organization now for quite a bit of time. So we want to start with this concept that what we're talking about today, not only is it possible, but it's actually much easier than you might expect. Technology has arrived, and there's been enough advancement in technology that the concepts that we're talking about today about digitizing your catalog so that your customers can browse and self-educate is no longer a 6-month, 1 year, 2-year project. We have a lot of customers that are achieving this in just 3 months. So who is this webinar going to be valuable for? We're really focusing on B2B today because you guys do have some unique challenges as it relates to your more legacy sales, marketing, and operations. You've got that legacy sales channels that you want to make sure that you're not disenfranchising. So we're really focusing today with B2B manufacturers, B2B distributors, and B2B value-added resellers. It's not to say what we're going to talk about today with attribution and taxonomies isn't going to be valuable for any retailers that might be listening, but really today we're focusing on the B2B. And again, if you're a retailer, just go ahead and listen on. I think you're going to pick up some valuable tips as well. So what are we going to cover today? Well, we're just going to really quickly touch on why you're going to want an online catalog. I mean, so if you're not bought in, if you're not quite sure what the value is there, we're really going to get into that on a really high level and just reinstate some research has been done out there that we think is really powerful. Once you're bought in that, okay, an online catalog is going to be beneficial for a B2B manufacturer, distributor, or VAR, what are those most important of that catalog, the components of that catalog? What are you going to need? What are you going to have to do? And then structuring your catalog, we're going to do some deep dives into what it takes to organize your product attributes and your taxonomies. And then we're going to be leveraging our panel and going into publishing your catalog and maintaining that catalog with PIMs and DXPs. And then just touch on what this means for your organization as you start down this journey. So why do you want a B2B catalog? Well, the numbers are out there. So we like to think about this in terms of who are your customers? And I'm not talking about who are your customers in segmentation and all those fancy terms that people use, which are important, but I want to get much simpler. Your customers are people, and people in the United States that shop when they're not at work have started to, not started to, for the last 20 years, have been training themselves on what they want, and convenience, selection, and price are becoming core staples of that shopping experience, even if you're buying through a physical channel. So in the United States, in 2017, 56% of all product searches began on Amazon. And all that we're trying to mention there is people have gotten used to researching the products they want to buy in a non-Google setting. So they're used to now going into online e-commerce sites to research product. So this means that your buyer has an inherent bias toward a multi-channel experience. So even people that are buying in the stores with physical people, they're researching online before they go in. And so one thing, this kind of mental shift that we might want to think about as we're having this conversation today is this concept of not thinking of your online catalog as a place where people buy, but think of it simply as a marketing channel. And when you think of it as a marketing channel, there's a whole bunch of research that comes to bear that this is the right stuff to do. Lead Forensics, Forbes Research, Forrester, they've all come out and said over the last year that B2B multi-channel marketing, especially with an online catalog, works. It increases your ROI. It decreases your cost of contact and cost of sales by 7.5%. It increases your average revenue by 9.5%. Forrester came out and said that if you have a multi-channel buying experience with an online catalog, you have a 17% increase in your average order value through your legacy channels. So all the research is there. The experts have spoken, if you will, the Lead Forensics, the Forbes, the Forresters, that have said that, hey, look, having a multi-touch purchase journey will increase all the critical KPIs that you track. I don't know, Lauren, Chris, are you guys seeing this out there with your customers? Is there anything that you guys want to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot that supports this. One thing that we really focus on is brands giving the consumer the experience that they demand. This falls right in line with that. So having the content, having the readily available information, no matter where your consumer is going to research your products, available for them is hugely influential in their buying decision.
No, exactly. So thanks, Lauren. So now when we take a look at how we're going to do this, so Lauren's seeing it out there. I know Chris is seeing it out there as well. The experts have spoken. So let's just say now you're bought in. You need to take your catalog online. So what does that take? What are the major components? So when we look at this, we say that launching your catalog online really just consists of 3 steps. And again, we're taking a look at a very, very high level. So the 3 steps are: you first need to digitize your catalog. You need to take that catalog out of wherever it is today, and usually in a very unstructured format or a very simple format, and you need to give it some structure. Now, once you give it some structure, you need to keep it in a place that is maintainable. So typically your ERP catalogs or your Excel spreadsheets aren't geared or built towards maintaining a digital product catalog. So you want to put it someplace where it is built for that. And then once it's there, you want to publish it and give it a beautification, if you will, and a manageability from the user experience standpoint. So you want to give it some structure. You want to maintain it so that structure, the work you did in giving it structure, is maintainable for the future. And then you want to be able to present it in the world in a way that you can control the user experience. So digitize, maintain, and then publish. So let's start with the digitization. So what are the real important things you need to be looking at when you're digitizing your catalog? Well, there's 2. Number 1, there's the product structure. We call this the titles, the attributes, the pictures, the descriptions, all that stuff that's going to define what your product is. And then there's the taxonomy, which is the categorization of your products. So how those products are grouped together. So again, the product structure is product specific, titles, descriptions, pictures, attributes that define the product itself, that differentiates it in the digital world. And the taxonomy is how you're going to group them all together. And so why is this important? Why are these the 2 most important concepts of your product structure and your digital product catalog? It's because of the findability issue. So the whole reason that you're going to be putting these things online is so people can find your products. So when they're on your website and they're browsing or they're searching, they have to be able to find what they're looking for. And the top 2 components in being able to find your catalog are your product structures and your taxonomies. So the better your product structure and taxonomy, the easier can find and educate themselves on what you sell. So we love this example. So Staples.com does this in a really, really nice way. And so we can take a look at how they look at attributes and taxonomies. So Staples here, you can see, put on my pointer, you can see that these here on the left-hand side are the attributes of their laptops. So when you're looking at Staples, and if you were to go on their website and you were able to search on laptops, they have this plus dozens more of attributes to help you refine and truly define what the products are. So style, whether it's refurbished, how much RAM, the type of processor, touchscreen. And on this side, you can see that this is how they do their taxonomy. This is how they group their products. And we're going to get into tips on how you can define, well, what should be an attribute and what should be a category. But this is a great visual example of it done right, of having attributes and taxonomies. And so what we want to understand is a typical product catalog in an ERP or a B2B customer looks something like this. So we just made this up. If you happened to be Staples 5 years ago, they might have had something like this in their Excel spreadsheets or in their ERP, where they had a generic product name, product info is all in one field, unit cost is done in bulk pricing because they're buying, of course, in bulk, and then they've got recommended sale pricing from the manufacturer. Well, how do you take this and turn it into something like this, where you understand what your descriptions are, you understand what your customers want to see up top, and then these are, of course, all the different attributes that they've got as it relates to their laptops. So how do you go from this to this? Well, the way that we want to look at it first is, again, we want to look at your attributes. So we put together 8 tips in creating your product attributes. So as you try to digitize your catalog and you've decided, okay, I need to go out there and take that one line Excel spreadsheet and I need to turn it into something better. These are 8 tips to get you there. So number one, it's this high level question of, well, how do I know when something's a category or an attribute? Because many times it is interchangeable, and we'll look at that. But number one, one thought that you might want to leverage is, well, attributes are thought about to refine results. They're used, and categories are used to group products with similar content. So attributes are used to refine, and categories are used to group. So an example that we use are color and t-shirts. I mean, very, very explicit examples of color is something that you're going to use to refine what type of t-shirt you have, versus it's very simple to think of t-shirts as a large group. So no matter how many different types of t-shirts you have, you group them. So color is an attribute and t-shirt's a category. Little bit more B2B specific, one of our customers, Motorola, who sells, of course, radios and other staple communication products online. For them, when they're selling one of their consumer radios, for example, they've got dozens of brands or dozens of types of consumer radios. So they group those together and consumer radios becomes a category, versus the frequency will help better refine what type of radio. So in this case, frequency is an attribute and consumer radios is a category. Another way of thinking about this are attributes are elements of information that can add more precise detail about specific products. So as you start looking at your products and you start thinking about, okay, well, how can I really get into the nitty gritty of how I would define what this product is? Again, online, you can't talk about it online. You have to think through it, and this is what people are going to see. Anything that seems to add more precise detail, that is a pretty good hint that should become an attribute. Number 2, are there any user experiences that can be driven by these attributes? So think about the user experiences and think about these attributes as of how they can drive those user experiences. Number 3, if you're a distributor that maybe aggregates across multiple manufacturers and you categorize by brand, you can also think of brand as a attribute. So this kind of links to that first tip that we gave about attributes versus categories. Well, there's also something that you can think of that attributes, you can have it as an attribute and as a category. So in the case of Staples, you can have Dell as a brand, and brand can be a category. So you can browse by brand and you can have all your Dell products categorized together. So if a user wants to browse Staples and they're like, hey, I'm looking for everything Dell. I want Dell printers. I want Dell laptops. They can then browse by brand. But Dell can also be an attribute. So if they're only looking at laptops and they want to see the filters on the left, they can then choose Dell as an attribute and then only see Dell laptops. So in the category laptop, Dell attribute. So when you're looking at your attributes and you're looking at your categories, there's some specific cases that it can be both. Number 4, there can be attributes that you don't show to the customer. So which attributes do you want to show them versus which ones do you want to keep hidden? For example, in stock, is discontinued. These might help you drive user experiences. So number 2 and number 4 here are linked. So you can drive a user experience by a non-visible attribute. So if something is discontinued or is going to be discontinued, you might not want to show them that, but you might drive that to show a discount sticker on your picture. So is going to be discontinued, you might leverage that as an attribute. If it's yes, then you add a 10% off discount, and you put a visual cue on there that this is going to be heavily discounted. Number 5, put yourself in your customer's shoes. Have you got a large catalog of products with lots of features, which would help narrow down the customer search? And if you're not sure, just ask your customers. There's so many tools out there that now online, you can go ahead and talk to your customers in a very, very large volume, very, very quickly, and quite affordably. So put yourself in those customers' shoes and really think about, if they're looking at driving down and finding your products, the findability of it, what are the attributes that they need? If you syndicate your catalog, and Lauren's going to talk about this a little bit later today, but if you syndicate your catalog, and what that simply means is, once you've got a digital catalog, you also want to sell through Amazon. You want to sell through Google Shopping. If you're a manufacturer that wants to go direct to your consumers, many times you leverage these other channels. Or if you're a manufacturer that has 50 distributors, and you're quote unquote syndicating your catalog to all 50 of them, think about what your distributor's value proposition is and what would help them sell your products to their customers. At the end of the day, a sale is a sale. Number 7, products in the same category should have similar attributes. So one way you can tell if you're going down the right path is take a look at what your categories are, and look at the products in those categories, and you should see very homogeneous attributions. You shouldn't have wildly different attributes that have no contextual relationship in the same category. And finally, number 8, attributes don't have to just be product related. For example, think about your segment attributes. And we always give the example here of a toy store, or an online toy reseller that might have as an attribute age. So toddlers, infants, teenagers. These are all segment attributes that aren't really have anything to do with refining the product, but they do refine the product to a specific customer. So a parent, of course, would love to know, is this product infant safe? And you can have those as attributes against your products. So those are 8 tips when creating your product attributes. And that hopefully, if you were to go back back when you get back to work, or if you're at work and you're going to go have this conversation with your colleagues or your marketing team or your technology team, you can hand these 8 tips over and really ask people to get to work in terms of understanding how you're going to be blowing out that catalog and giving it this kind of structure that's necessary to make them findable. So with product attributes out of the way, we can shift our attention to taxonomy, which is a different beast altogether, but equally as important. So the formal definition for a taxonomy, an online taxonomy, is a classification of ordered categories. And our head of digital experience, Kelly, she's got a great way of thinking about taxonomies when she explains it to our customers, which is think about it as a closet. And it's true. The taxonomies of an online experience is very personal to the person shopping. And it can be quite frustrating to each individual person if they're going through a taxonomy and they can't find what they're looking for. They think that the way that they're browsing is the way. The good thing is, you'll be amazed, there's a huge overlap in the majority of the way that your customers browse. So if you think about your taxonomy in terms of a closet, you can understand that there's multiple ways of organizing a closet. There's no right way or wrong way. It's just the way that your customers are trying to understand where your products are. So you can have products that are color coordinated. You can have taller products segregated in one area. You can have male and female in different areas. You can have your folded products in some area, right? If you have your closet this way, this is a very organized closet for the person that uses this closet, versus this closet down here is organized in a completely different way. But to the individual user of this closet, it is just as functional. So here, what you're looking at is this whole concept around short to long. Shoot, guys, I'm going to pause for a second. Stupid chat popping up and down. I'll just cut this part out, and I'll just get started again right here. And 3, 2, 1. And I'll start from over here. All right, so with product attribution out of the way, we shift our attention to building your taxonomy, which is a completely different beast than attribution, but just as important in helping your customers find your products. So the formal definition for an online taxonomy is a classification of ordered categories. And it sounds really simple, but it can get really complex when you're trying to create your own. So our head of digital experience, Kelly, has a great way of thinking about taxonomies. And that is, she thinks about taxonomies as a closet when she's explaining it to her customers. She's like, think about your taxonomy as a closet. And then there's no right way or wrong way of organizing your closet, but it's the way that is going to help you find your clothes or your shoes the fastest. And of course, you want it to be organized and you want it to be contextually relevant. So you can have wildly different types of closets and closet ways of organizing your closet. So in particular, for example, this closet is organized by color. It's got male clothes on one side, female clothes on the other side. It's got your shoes in one area. You've got items folded in another. Over here, this closet is completely different. It's structured from short to long. It's got your shoes here all the way at the bottom on the floor. It's got scarves folded up here versus folded up here. You've got your jeans folded at the top, right? At the end of the day, these are wildly different taxonomies, but they're the right taxonomy for the person using it. So when you're thinking about your taxonomy, think about how your customers want their products organized, and they're expecting it in a certain way. And again, the best way to do this is to talk to your customers, and you can leverage things like card sorts, but we're going to get that. We're about to explain how you can go about building the right taxonomy for your customers. So it's really important to understand if you do this wrong, what are the impacts? And so number one, people can't find what they're looking for. If you have a poor taxonomy, the most important thing is people can't find what they're looking for if they're browsing through your catalog structure. You're literally going to have a web of retail content that search engines can't index properly, because your search indexes now and your crawlers are really, really smart, and they're looking for context, and they're looking to be able to provide people ways of finding the right content. And so many times on like Google, even Facebook, when they're doing their paid advertising and non-paid search in terms of Google, they will try to provide contextually relevant results, not just, oh, okay, the words were on the page. So it goes far beyond just SEO. It's looking at context. And if you have a poor taxonomy, it's going to throw off the context. From your customer side, things like filter, compare, and sort become really confusing if your taxonomy is wrong. So remember when we were talking about your attribution, we said if you have categories where attributes are wildly off, you've got the wrong categories. Well, categories are part of your taxonomy. So imagine if Staples put printer paper and laptops in the same category. So your lowest level category, if you had something like office supplies, well, now your filters at the bottom are going to say something like RAM, processor, and page size. That makes absolutely really no contextual sense. So it's going to throw everything off. So your SEO becomes more difficult. Your thesaurus entries become longer in terms of helping people understand what categories they need to go to. Your breadcrumb navigation goes off. That's the feature in the top left or right of most websites that show you the path that you took to get somewhere. And then services that are user experience driven, like promotions or shipping, those will require more customizations, more cost if your taxonomies aren't built correctly. So a lot of impacts for not doing this the right way. So if you want to create your taxonomy, we're going to give some tips here. So first off, when you're creating your taxonomy, set the goals for what your taxonomy is trying to achieve. Really figure out who that targeting audience of your taxonomy is, and then make sure you test your taxonomy with card sorts. So we're about to go over 8 tips to do this, but when you set the goals of your taxonomy and you understand who your taxonomy is going to, and then you test, you're much farther down the path of avoiding those pitfalls that we just went over. All right, so 8 tips for creating your taxonomy. Number 1, you should have a taxonomy that has a restricted list of categories. Don't go crazy. You don't want one category, one product, so that some of my customers have over 1 million products that they sell. Obviously, you want to do a logical grouping of your products. So use a restricted list of categories. Number 2, you want to make sure that your categories are mutually exclusive from each other, that as the best that you can, that they're completely unambiguous, that it's very clear that if I want to go buy a printer, I'm going to go to the printer category. If I want to buy a laptop, I'm going to go to computers. Office supplies or office equipment or things that I use to work aren't very good category names at a low level. Number 3, categories and subcategories should be in a relational hierarchy. So it should make a ton of sense why a subcategory belongs to a category. They need to be related to each other and have a natural flow. Attributes and meta descriptions should be applied consistently. This is kind of the other side of the coin of what we talked about in the 8 tips for the attribution. You want to make sure that your attributes and your descriptions are applied consistently so that when you're creating your categories, you're able to do things like compare features really, really well. And those attributes are as homogeneous as possible within your categories. Number 5, you want to make sure that information has a good scent. That's just a kind of a creative way of saying that it makes a lot of sense that as you drill down or drill across categories, that the customer, the analogy here is that as the customer is trying to find a product and they're drilling down into your categories, the scent of what they're trying to find is getting stronger, right? So imagine you're following this chocolate chip cookie smell, and as you're going through the house and you're opening the doors, the smell should be getting stronger and stronger that you're getting toward the kitchen. So if someone's looking for a product, your taxonomy should be organized enough that it looks like they're going in the right direction and it's getting stronger and stronger and they know they're going in the right place. Number 6, your hierarchy should be normalized. So you shouldn't have some categories that have 8 levels deep and some that have 3. For them, as much as possible, you want to have an equal number of subcategories in all your master categories. You don't want polyhierarchies for top level categories, and you hardly ever want polyhierarchies for the low levels. So this means that you shouldn't have categories residing, subcategories in multiple top level categories. So a lot of tools will allow you to do this, but you want to avoid this as much as possible because it will get confusing. It might seem like an easy way out, but ultimately it will confuse search engines and it will confuse your customers as well. And finally, number 8, make sure that you've got a policy for adding, editing, or deleting the categories. So the categories directly impact your URLs, which are the addresses on the top of the browser. And again, Lauren will touch on this, but when you're maintaining your category structure, it has a lot of impacts if you continuously keep changing it, especially for search engines and especially for your customers themselves. So avoid, once you've established your category structure, to continuously go back and change it. And finally, for those retailers out there, because your product sets are usually a little bit smaller than B2B, we've got some retail taxonomy rules that some best practices. You don't want more than 20 top level categories. You don't want any more than 14 subcategories. You don't want more than 3 to 4 levels of depth. Your category labels should be nouns and they shouldn't be descriptions. So try to use nouns as much as possible, like laptops, printers, etc. You want to use labels that are comparable at every level, and you want to make sure that your tenses are the same. So you can use singular or plural, but don't mix them. So don't use laptops and printer. Don't use printers and laptop. Just use laptop and printer or laptops and printers. And capitalization punctuations need to be applied consistently. So again, it doesn't confuse your customer and they don't think that one thing is more important than the other, or that the difference in capitalization and punctuation signifies anything more than just kind of a lack of discipline when creating that taxonomy. All right, so those are your 8 tips then for creating your taxonomy. So we went over 8 tips for creating your attribution. We went over 8 tips for creating your taxonomy. And now really what we're going to do is dig into what does it take once you've created these taxonomies to really be able to maintain and present this to the world. So with that, let's hand it over. So what we've talked about is ERPs going and taking all this data out, and now you've digitized it. You've applied your attributes, you've applied your taxonomies. And Lauren, if you could just jump into, well, what does it take to maintain this category and these taxonomies and these attributes? And then we'll hand it over to Chris to talk about what it would be to present them.
Sure. So first off, before I dive into why it's important to have a PIM or a PXM, I'll explain what that actually is. So a PIM is traditionally where you store all of your product content so that it can live together. So typically today we see that content lives in a few different places. So ERP systems, which is essential to running your business, right? You need to have all of that logistical information. You need a place for your UPC to start. But actually using the content that lives in an ERP is really difficult when a consumer needs to read it and understand how that relates to your products. So one, just pulling all of your disparate pieces of content together in one central location so that it can live and your team has a place to organize that data, manage it, and then ultimately send it out to all the different places it needs to go. So when you think about a PXM rather than a PIM, it's really this product experience management, managing the consumer's journey every point in the digital process in their buying experience. So thinking about once your team has content centralized, you have a process around this content so all of your teams know where to go when they need pieces of information, and then sending it out to all of your downstream channels, whether that be more traditional retailers like a Staples or an Amazon, or if that's feeding into your own internal systems, or sending content along to your DXP.
Hey, Lauren, what type of users are you finding usually work within a PIM or a PXM? So within a customer, right? Who's in there? Who's doing all this work?
So that's a really good question, and it depends. So we're seeing a lot more users on the business side. So the users that are interacting with your customers need a place to go to get this information. So typically they'll be logging in to pull information out. Many times we're seeing digital and marketing teams actually working within the system to contribute information and really setting workflows and different processes in place so that the entire team is organized and they know exactly which pieces of information they're responsible for contributing to.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. And then is it the same people that, I mean, you were talking about taking data out of your ERPs and your spreadsheets and your legacy systems, which is really technical, right? I mean, a lot of times business users aren't digging into SAP or EBS or whatever the ERPs might be. So have you found that customers typically get more work done because they're able to really have a much more beautiful user interface to be able to maintain this data?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is a place for them to actually go in and work. You don't want business users logging into your ERP, right? That would mess a lot of things up.
Yeah.
But the PXM is a really great place for them to have a workbench to prepare content for all the different places it goes. So that's why you would take that information out of an ERP, make it digital and consumer facing ready, so that you can send it along to ultimately give your consumers the experience they need to make an informed buying decision.
And then, I mean, I don't know if this question is for Chris and Lauren. So Lauren, the type of tools that you guys are talking about here, when you've created this digital catalog and you want to store it somewhere, do you find that these tools like PXMs and PIMs are mainly made for product data, or are you storing blogs and that kind of content as well, because you're talking about creating content, or is that better tailored toward some of the DXPs or the CMSs that Chris is going to touch on?
Yeah, I would say that kind of content is better tailored towards a DXP or a CMS. Typically, when you're thinking PIM, you're thinking anything related specifically to your products.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a really great question. But why would you maintain a PIM to organize and publish this content? Like I said before, it's a place to centralize all of that content so your team can develop the right processes to get your company into a really digitally mature state. This will enable you to grow your revenue much more quickly, so you can syndicate all this content out to your downstream channels. You'll be able to provide your distributors with all the content they need. And it's going to be a lot of information that they're asking for because they need to merchandise and sell products as well. And then just as another sales avenue, another revenue generating avenue. Arm your sales reps with the latest and greatest information. They need to have the most up-to-date information so they're selling your products accurately. So this is a really great place to give them all the information they would need.
Perfect. And then, this kind of leads directly into Chris's area of expertise. I mean, Chris, you're going to be talking about how these types of tools to present present the catalog and beautify them becomes much easier if you have a tool specifically made for it. But before you get into it, maybe you can touch on when in all the different implementations that you've done and all the customers you've worked with, I mean, how much does it help when the data is already pre-organized, let's say sitting in a PIM or a PXM before it's ready to be kind of shown to the world?
Yeah, thanks, Roy. It's a huge help. I mean, I think many companies started out with their online journeys not realizing the importance of a PIM, and they quickly just ran into trouble. They didn't have the right data organized in the right way. A lot of the back-end ERP tools and things that people use, spreadsheets predominantly, just simply don't scale when you start to have a larger, more complex catalog. So, I've, in keeping with the numbered approach here, 4 tips for delivering the best digital experience, right? We've looked at the Staples website, and I think that's a great place to look if you're thinking about the type of experience you want to deliver. Even though for the purposes of this conversation, we've been talking primarily about bringing your product catalog online for marketing and informational purposes, you still want to provide a commerce-like experience. All of your buyers, all of your business partners that you interact with shop online in their daily lives, and they expect a similar experience in terms of a rich search engine, powerful browse and faceted navigation features, convenience features like search type ahead, all of the things that they would expect on a modern website, an e-commerce website, they'll expect when they come to your site looking for product information. Another nice thing about thinking of it as a commerce experience is even if you're not doing e-commerce today, with this sort of rich digital experience, you can easily plug in a commerce platform later on down the road if you decide to offer the ability to shop directly from your site. So the modern commerce platforms that are out there are all going to market as headless, meaning they're API first. They can plug into a digital experience platform and provide all of that back-end commerce functionality in terms of capturing the order, handling pricing and discounting, and everything else that needs to be there for a full e-commerce experience. Number 2, design for mobile first. You may think of your business buyers as people sitting at their desks using their desktop or laptop computers, but many of them are mobile professionals. They're moving around. They may be using their iPhone or a tablet device to access your site. So you want to make sure that your site provides a good experience no matter which device they're accessing it from. These days, most people use responsive design, which is really a set of standards and templates that are available out there, a lot of them open source, to build your website so that you can really sort of design one time, start with mobile, make sure that works, and other device types, tablet and desktop, will work as well. And then you need to think of the fact that down the road, there may be other channels that you want to service as well, things that are emerging, things like voice-activated devices, chat bots, ordering through a chat type conversation. Depending on your business, you may be offering in-device commerce. So we're seeing things like car dashboards offering the ability to conduct transactions. Of course, we've all seen the refrigerators with the built-in screens. So more and more, e-commerce and the ability to interact with product catalogs is going to pop up in more and more unexpected areas.
Hey, Chris, on that, when you talk about not just the website or the mobile site, but these new modern ways of buying, we're seeing a lot of our B2B customers, they're hosting their data in something like a DXP or a CMS, and then they're leveraging the basic architecture of those tools to be able to do buy experiences, for example, through the actual devices that they're manufacturing themselves. So we've got a customer that's leveraging IoT, for example, and they've got factory machines, and those IoT devices are showcasing, okay, yeah, this thing needs service. And then they take the service and it sends a message to a CMS, and then people can actually look at and see a description of service plans. So could you just quickly touch on a very, very high level, how these types of modern platforms, and we're not talking about the stuff like 5-10 years ago, but these things that are built in the cloud, how much easier it is, relatively speaking, for people to build out these entire experiences?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, you're seeing a big trend across the industry in moving to what we call an API first or a headless model, which means any functionality where you envision a user sitting down at a computer and using a keyboard and a mouse and looking at a web browser, that same activity, the same interactions may be taking place machine to machine. They may be taking place between two different applications. So any functionality that's being presented to a user should also be being presented through an API. And when you adopt an API first mentality, then all of these things that you're talking about become possible. The machines on the factory floor, as you're saying, can issue calls. They can issue API requests and calls to that system and initiate the activity. When we think of a DXP, we think of the DXP serving or delivering information and access across multiple channels. And a channel can really be any of those things. It can be a user sitting at a computer. It can be a machine initiating an interaction through APIs. All of those channels need to be managed. Ideally, you'd manage them all within a single tool so that as you're rolling out new functionality and new capabilities, that it's available across all those channels, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you add a new channel.
Right. And so the last question I had on this one was, a lot of customers, especially if they're doing this for the first time. So if we're talking about digitizing a catalog and launching a B2B catalog, it typically means that this is a company's first foray. I mean, it could be wildly successful, billions of dollars of revenue coming in a year through their legacy marketing and sales. So this might be their first try in really having a fully fledged online digital channel. Mm-hmm. And the question comes up, okay, I've got this B2B catalog. I've digitized it. I've leveraged all the tips for creating my attribution, taxonomies. It works. It's beautiful. It's just awesome. But I don't have the capabilities or the people to run it. So do the modern CMSs or DXPs actually help anywhere with that? Not just the presentation, but actually help kind of replace the need for hiring a bunch of people to manage and having the optimal experience?
Sure. A lot of the modern systems out there are starting to incorporate AI and ML capabilities, right? So if you think of a large product catalog, especially, and if you think about making that catalog available online through search and browse navigation, curating that experience can be very time consuming, can require a lot of manual effort. I'll just pick an example. Bloomreach Search, for example, has a very strong AI and ML set of capabilities under the hood that allow the search engine to sort of pick and choose and reorder product catalog listings so that the most important products sort of naturally bubble to the top. The things that people look for most often, the products that provide the highest value, are the ones that are going to be returned first in the search results. This applies to faceted navigation as well. So if you look at a site like Staples, where there are, if you do a search for laptop, for example, it'll come back with many different brands, many different styles, many different colors, etc. The options that are most common and most frequently picked naturally bubble up to the top so that users are most likely to see them.
Without having someone to go in there manually say, okay, I want RAM and processors to be at the top. You're saying now that there's the toolings out there, the more modern cloud-based tools start doing this for you so that you don't need a team that has to manually go in and say, okay, I want these facets at the top.
Exactly.
It's pretty awesome.
Our search engine essentially tracks every interaction, every click, every search, every browse. And as our CEO likes to say, our search engine is getting smarter every night while you sleep. It's looking at all that data, seeing how people are interacting with your site, and then improving the results automatically so that, again, you don't have to hire an army of merchants and taxonomists to make all those tweaks and changes on an ongoing basis.
And I can just hear some of our listeners just think about this now. And you said, okay, it's tracking, it's looking. Talk to me about security. How do we, as B2B organizations, how do we protect ourselves and our customers' data?
Sure. You know, a lot of our company was founded in Europe, so GDPR and privacy regulations have always been a big part of our operating environment. And when I talk about tracking, we're doing all of this on an anonymized basis. So this is not
right.
Facebook style tracking where, you know, the minute you do a search for a product, everywhere you go, you're seeing ads for that product. This is much
Why you got to throw
anonymous.
Facebook under the bus?
There you go.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is simply for the purpose of providing a better search experience, not for providing targeted advertising and everything else. So the actions that you perform while you're browsing and searching the catalog are going to improve the search results for everybody. It's not going to come back and target ads at you specifically. Okay, so going back to the 4 tips, number 3 is really about building a content and commerce digital experience. So as Lauren mentioned, your PIM is really the source of truth for all of your product catalog data, but you want to enrich that experience with how-to articles, knowledge-based articles, all of that information that will make your website a destination for people who are here to learn more about your product catalog and about the solutions that you offer. And finally, remember that your customer's experience starts at Google. Now that you have all of this rich product catalog content online, make sure that your site is adhering to best practices around SEO so that the search engines can find and index that content, and so that when people go to those search engines, when they're doing searches, they're finding your product catalog ranking high in the search engine's results.
Perfect. This is awesome stuff, Chris. Thank you. So kind of just to recap, what we've done is we've been really talking about how do you launch a B2B catalog online for your customers. So we went over the 3 steps. You first need to digitize your catalog, take the data out of your ERP, give it product attribution, give it a taxonomy. We give 8 tips for product attribution. We give 8 tips for creating your taxonomy. Then Lauren walked us through the importance of taking that structured data and hosting it in a place that's meant to host structured product data, like a PIM or a PXM. And then Chris gave us a lot of great information about how do you take that data from the PXM and actually present it to the world in a place that, in a way that your customers can leverage it and experience it and have that commerce-like experience. So some really good stuff. So as we wrap up, we just want to touch on some really important pieces as we're talking about a problem that B2B customers have, and that they need to have multi-channel experiences. Forrester said it, Forbes has said it, Lead Forensics have said it. It's going to help manage and track your KPIs. It's going to keep your customers more engaged. But we've really been talking about one area of impact, or maybe 2, that deals with when you make these digital choices. And we just want to really make sure that everyone here is aware that there's typically 5 things that you need to be careful about when you're making these digital choices, like launching a catalog. And we're just going to touch on them really quickly. Technology, obviously there's going to be technology impacts. We've been talking about a PIM impact here and a DXM impact, but there might be other technology impacts. Your user experience, you really want to give it a lot of thought to that part that Chris was talking about, that commerce-like experience. What are your customers expecting? Not everyone's expecting in B2B a Staples or an Amazon. You might need to be something much simpler, but what does that experience need to look like? You want to look at the data. So you're going to be producing a lot of data. We didn't even touch on this, and we could probably create an entire series just on how do you take the data of people that are browsing your catalog and how do you leverage it. You want to look at change management. What are the people and the processes that are going to be impacted? Do you need to hire more people? Do you need to train people? What are the processes? How are they going to change in your organization? and of course your content. The content factory, if you will, creating those attributes and those taxonomies. So every digital choice that you make, not just launching a B2B catalog, will typically have these 5 impact areas that we want you to be aware of. With that, we're going to go ahead and close it off. We love to share. We love to share our ideas, our thought topics. That's why Lauren and Chris were nice enough to join us here today and just put all this amazing content together for you. And if you have any other questions, we're happy to answer those questions and to be a little bit more consultative that's unique to your organization. So we typically, when we do these, we like to offer, hey, if you have half an hour, 45 minutes of questions, we are happy to come together for you as a group. We can talk individually. If you've got questions specifically around PIMS, get a hold of Lauren. She's just got a ton of information and a ton of experience in this. If you want to talk more about that presentation layer, give Chris a call. The tools that he's representing are just top of class and are just fantastic. And if you just go to overall conversations around, well, how do I make this journey? What are the best practices from beginning to end? You can always give me a call. Those are our mobile numbers. You can text us. We're happy to answer. So with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. I don't know, Lauren and Chris, if you wanted to say any closing words, but we'll be putting this online in case you wanted to go back and revisit any of these. And again, you can always just give us a call or shoot us an email if you wanted a more specific conversation. With that, I'll turn it over to Lauren and Chris to say goodbye.
Yeah, thanks, Rohit. Great talking with everyone, and please reach out with any questions.
Yeah, and from my perspective, thank you, Rohit, for putting this together, and we'd be happy to talk to you about digital experiences and how you can provide those great experiences to your customers.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thank you. Talk soon.
Bye.